At what point are we going to stop getting movies titled The Possession of, The Exorcism of, The Haunting of, insert woman's name here?
This job is not for everyone.
Because of the hours?
Because the only co-workers are cadavers.
The Possession of Hannah Grace is directed by... I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. It stars Shay Mitchell as Megan, a former cop who's taken a job at the graveyard shift at the local morgue, only to find that one of the bodies in the morgue of a girl named Hannah Grace died in an exorcism and is now currently being inhabited by a demon. I'll start by saying this movie is part of a subgenre that I happen to love. The creepy things happen in a mortuary after the discovery of a mysterious body subgenre admittedly isn't a very big one, but The Autopsy of Jane Doe is one of the scariest movies I've seen in years, so I definitely had some hopes for this one, at least just in terms of its overall atmosphere. It's also worth noting that the title of this movie is fucking stupid. It was originally titled Cadaver, which in my opinion is a much better title, especially considering that the actual possession of Hannah Grace, a girl that we know nothing about whatsoever because she's literally possessed for the entirety of her screen time, has nothing to do with the plot of this movie at all. Hannah Grace isn't a character being possessed. She's not really a character at all. She's an obstacle for the main character to overcome. This movie is just... I'm more annoyed because there was actual potential here, and there was some effort to an extent, and make no mistake, this movie would not have been good regardless, but there's a decent movie in here clawing to get out. Unfortunately, effort only gets you so far, and this movie really ends up coming across as a poor man's Autopsy of Jane Doe. Just, you know, minus any subtlety or effective scares. Credit where credit's due, there are actually one or two decently creepy scenes in this movie. It's shot competently. I absolutely love the set design and the choice of location. When you have your entire horror movie set in a morgue, it gives you a ton of really ample opportunities for incredibly scary scenarios. Your character's alone, surrounded by dead bodies in the silence, in the dark, and weird things are happening all around her. That should be horrifying. And you kind of have to be crazy to not take advantage of that opportunity. The problem is, The Possession of Hannah Grace never does. Every fucking attempt to scare in this movie either makes the horrible mistake of taking things way too far, or sacrificing legitimate tension and a creepy atmosphere for the sake of a cheap jump scare. Once you get past one or two decently framed or well-lit shots where something unsettling is moving around in the background, every other attempt this movie makes at scaring you boils down to what's essentially a Carrot Top wannabe jumping out from behind a morgue drawer and yelling, "Boo!" That's not a joke, that actually happens in this movie. We can't just have the corpse subtly moving and mostly moving off screen, leaving both the main character and the audience wondering what exactly is going on. Nah, we gotta show her moving right from the get-go. One of the first scenes involving Megan and Hannah's body goes like this. Megan has Hannah's body laid out in the morgue drawer. She's doing her autopsy. Megan turns around. Behind her, you see the corpse start shifting and it starts moving, and then when Megan turns back around to look at her, the corpse is in the same position, but now she's looking at Megan. Now imagine that, minus the fact that you see the corpse moving around. She just turns, and when she turns back, the corpse is looking at her. That's horrifying. That's 20 times creepier. But fuck that, this movie wants to spoon-feed the audience everything. And on the subject of spoon-feeding the audience, the mid-2000s era editing in this film is awful. There are seriously elements of this movie that feel straight out of dead silence in terms of its editing. The movie doesn't trust its audience to remember or understand basic details. Another example. It's established earlier on that Hannah's corpse has a really deep gash in its hip. Later on, as Megan notices the fact that her body's healed itself and the wound is suddenly gone, the movie feels the need to cut back to itself, showing you a flashback of Megan noticing the hip wound the first time, as though the audience wouldn't remember it was there. It's just this awkward, unnecessary flashback to maybe 20 minutes before, just to remind the audience that, hey, something's changed. And sure, all of those things are issues, and this movie wouldn't have been good regardless. But with all of that, it was really just generic horror movie bad in that, oh, I'll watch it once, I'll forget I watched it, that'll be the end of it. Strong meh. But then the end of this movie happens, and it becomes one of the worst paced films I've ever seen. Hannah's dad suddenly reappears after a weird bit of exposition that feels like ADR, where it's detailed that off-screen he murdered the 2 cops who arrested him. Then he delivers a long-winded, but not too long-winded, you'll understand in a minute, monologue about how Hannah's possessed and she died during an exorcism, and the only way that they can destroy her is to burn her because she can't heal from that. And then, in the literal next shot, without a response from Megan, without anything, they're standing on the other side of the hospital in the incinerator room, about to push Hannah into the fire. And then she springs to life and grabs her dad and shoves him into the fire and then begins chasing Megan in the very sudden climax that feels like it gives you whiplash. All of that I just detailed happens in the span of 30 seconds. And I'm not exaggerating. It's one of the most rushed bits of filmmaking, all for the sake of getting to the climax quicker, despite the fact that this movie is already short. I'm not exaggerating when I say that the suddenness of all that, my jaw was on the floor. I couldn't believe what I was watching. In typical Sony fashion, this movie feels like 2 completely different films that were haphazardly slapped together. The actual possession subplot could have been completely removed and the movie would have been so much creepier. In fact, don't even remove it. Just get rid of the opening scene detailing the exorcism and take the details of that scene and move them to later on when the father is explaining what happened. The fact that we open up right away on the exorcism sets the tone for a completely different movie. On top of that, it explains to the audience right off the bat what's going on, which I think is a poor storytelling choice in general. Even the opening death scene sets the tone for a completely different type of film. That scene is actually gnarly. It's a really gruesome bit of gore that this movie never measures up to again. It's the only death in this movie that justifies an R rating, and the rest, okay, Hannah walks towards somebody, they float up in a T-pose, and then their bones all crack and break while she just goes, they're dead, rinse and repeat for the entire film, and every character death. There's no mystery and no fun and no reason to watch. I'm going to say that the possession of Hannah Grace is poor. Save for a few moments of effectiveness, the entire thing just comes off as a Sony product trying to emulate much better films like The Autopsy of Jane Doe. All while trying to be an exorcism movie too? It's really confused, and that's understandable given who produced this. Sony! And I really can't stress enough that this movie is not worth your time, especially considering how long it ends up feeling. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. If you like this channel and you want to see more and you want to see how I'm going to close out the year this year, click down there, like, comment, subscribe. There's a Patreon link down in the description if you want to be like any of these cool people right here. Please consider donating, guys. I would really appreciate it. Poke around, see what you want. Even $1 helps. But even if you don't, thank you so much for watching anyway. I truly, really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon.